Project-Based Learning. LDT 602. Investigating of Teaching and Learning. Cassie Tree. To prove project-based learning is an effective method of teaching, people rely on the research of people before them. By looking at their theories, we can show how this educational method is backed by science. First, are the theories from Confucius and Aristotle. The theory, as most know, are, you learn by doing. To learn is to ask questions, inquiry, and then to think critically. The next theorist is John Dewey. As a social and educational reformer, John Dewey changed how education was viewed. His theory stated education would be more effective with meaningful activities with students participating with classmates and the materials. During this time, education was students sitting and memorizing facts for a later use. He also argued that if the curriculum were connected to the lives of the students, they will learn more. Phyllis Blumenfeld, along with others, took a look at project-based learning, specifically why it hadn't gained acceptance by the majority. According to them, it failed because the teachers were not basing the project on what motivates students. Blumenfeld believes the driving question will create the project-based learning that will be successful. Lastly, Jean Piaget was a psychologist whose theory speaks to experiences at different ages and how we understand them. As educators, we must create these experiences so students will be able to ask questions, to investigate, interact with others, and most importantly reflect upon the experiences. In order to fully understand what project-based learning is, we first must examine what it is not. Just because it has project in the title, it is not a project that can be transferred from one grade to another or from one school to another. Project-based learning is not a short-term project that a student can finish and then ask what to do next. The project-based learning does not focus on the product or the end answer. It is not teacher-directed. The teacher is still a valued asset in project-based learning, but they work behind the scene. Lastly, students do not learn after the project is done. Many projects claim they are project-based learning, but they are bought by the kit, so there isn't authentic learning happening because it is set up by design. Now that you know what project-based learning is not, let's take a look at what it is. Project-based learning is cyclical. It starts with an authentic driving question that cannot be answered easily. Working in groups, students research information and gain a lot of knowledge. They use any tool they feel they need to help answer this question. Most of the time it is exploring different options through some sort of hands-on learning. With a project-based learning, there is always some intermingling of other subjects. Once they find the answer, they will share it with others and reflect upon their knowledge only to come up with more questions to investigate. These are critical skills that are necessary for college and careers. It was mentioned that project-based learning is not teacher-directed, but that doesn't mean the teachers have nothing to do. The teacher must plan and design the driving questions. When designing, they have to ensure state standards are being covered and to the rigor they need to be at. Along with the planning phase, teachers must have checkpoints created and team norms thought out so all students feel safe when in groups. From the start of the school year, the teacher must create a culture where all students have a sense of belonging. Because students will be working in groups, each person must feel safe to converse with others. The last thing that needs to occur to ensure a successful project-based learning is scaffolding knowledge. When presented with the driving question, all the pieces of information they need would have been discussed in some manner. While teams are working on their driving questions, the teacher is checking in with each team, making sure they are making progress and to see if they need any resources. During this whole process, the teacher is learning with the students. As I was researching project-based learning, I was also creating a science unit for this upcoming school year. I have learned a lot from the different resources I read, and there is always tips/advice that I write down so I don't forget while I am facilitating this unit. Start small is one of them. Since I haven't done a true project-based learning, I need to remember to start small so we, as a class, can work out any kinks that might arise during this time. And if I don't put a timeline, specifically an end date, I won't be stressed if it takes longer than usual. Of course, I will have checkpoints and a general idea of how long I am able to spend on it, but nothing that is set in stone. Lastly, if one driving question grows into another question, so be it. But it must happen naturally. In my opinion. If it is forced, students will lose interest in the project. Many people have dedicated their lives to ensure project-based learning is done correctly in the millions of classrooms around the United States. These two websites have amazing resources with much detail about this topic, so it can be done successfully. Edutopia has a plethora of videos of teachers during project-based learning along with articles to get any teacher started with this adventure. The Buck Institute for Education is built around educating teachers to be the best at project-based learning. The founders of this site have spent their whole lives making sure project-based learning remains authentic and pure. There are so many resources, advice, tips, and testimonies, it would take a while to dig through everything. Resources I used to create this presentation.